Why do I have the feeling that I've seen this before? Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today I'm going to be talking about the 2020 romantic comedy Palm Springs, which will be released on Hulu on July 10th. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content like reviews, ranked lists, and trailer reactions. All my reviews include a breakdown of the pros and cons, my rating, and some tailored film recommendations, so be sure to watch through to the end of this video for all that extra content. Palm Springs stars Andy Samberg, Cristin Milioti, and J.K. Simmons, and was directed by Barbakow. It tells the story of strangers Niles and Sarah, who meet at a Palm Springs wedding and find themselves stuck in a time loop, reliving the same day over and over again. I've been hearing positive buzz about Palm Springs since its premiere at Sundance in January. Quite a few people I know currently have it as their #1 movie of the year so far. And so going into this film was exciting, but also a bit daunting, because I've been overhyped on movies in the past, and I'm always a little concerned when a film comes out of a festival with so much buzz. As I usually try to do in situations like this, I stayed away from any and all information about this movie before watching it. No trailers, no premise. I didn't even know what genre it was, to be honest. I had the opportunity to check this movie out a few days before its wide release thanks to Hulu and Cinemania World, and after watching, I can confidently say that, for me at least, it wasn't overhyped at all. In fact, I think there was a pretty perfect amount of hypage surrounding this film. I'm a bit of a sucker for time loop movies. Groundhog Day is the fantastic and classic example of this type of story, but it's kind of spawned a time loop subgenre and a lot of similar films. And you know what? I love them. Happy Death Day, Edge of Tomorrow, even variations on the concept like Source Code. And so when I realized that Palm Springs was a time loop movie, I was incredibly pleased. Now, I love this type of premise, so I'm probably inherently a little more lenient when it comes to these movies, but I can definitely acknowledge that time loop movies have the potential to get old very fast. There's only so many times that you can watch the same thing again and again before you start to get bored. That applies to repeated scenes within a time loop movie, but also to time loop movies in general. These types of films have a tendency to follow the same basic path. We see a little variation, mostly related to the primary genre, but they usually stick really close to the rules established by Groundhog Day, and the general story structure of that film too. Our main character is usually pretty flawed. We follow them on their first run of their time loop day, and then discover along with them that they're actually stuck in a time loop. Confusion and humor ensue before our main character eventually realizes that only by becoming a better person will they be able to move on to tomorrow. Palm Springs manages to take all the things we expect from and love about time loop movies and repackages them into something that is nostalgically familiar but fundamentally different. There are a few key changes here, but there's one premise adjustment in particular that's an absolute game changer. And it's something so simple that, first off, you'll wonder why it hasn't been done before, and secondly, you're amazed that such a minor change could have such a big impact and make this movie feel so fresh. So, what is this simple adjustment? It's not just one person stuck in the time loop. Instead, we have two main characters who are experiencing the same day again and again. And you might be thinking, big deal, it's still the same type of movie, but it's not. I'm telling you, it's such a simple change. Deceptively simple, but it has such a big impact on the plot. Not only do we get the humorous interactions and romantic comedy elements that you'd expect, but it's surprisingly heartfelt and charming too. Because instead of having a story about one character stuck in this repetitive life of solitude and loneliness, we've got two people who are sharing the experience together. They've got somebody else to talk to who understands the situation, somebody to bounce ideas off of, and somebody else who will remember the events of the day once it resets. This also allows for some very entertaining and interesting conversations about the time loop itself, giving the whole thing a bit more of a meta twist than usual. Of course, this two-person time loop thing wasn't a guaranteed success, so the casting here was really important for this to work. Andy Samberg's able to bring this comedic, laid-back quality to the Niles character, while Cristin Milioti delivers a more proactive performance for the role of Sarah. They're very different characters who approach their unique situation in very different ways, but it works as this cohesive thing. They've got great chemistry and can play off each other really well for both the comedy and the more heartfelt, thought-provoking stuff too. So, yes, Palm Springs is another time loop movie. It has a lot of things that you're gonna find familiar if you've seen Groundhog Day or any number of other movies like this. But it's also a very fresh and unique take on the time loop premise. It's an incredibly light and breezy movie, yet somehow seamlessly incorporates some really poignant themes, as well as some very raunchy and dark humor. Palm Springs is easily the most enjoyable new movie I've watched so far this year, so it's now topping another 2020 list. I can't wait to watch this one again, and again, and again. Alright, let's talk about the pros and cons. Pro number one is going to be a bit of an obvious one, but it's the premise. Like I said before, I'm a sucker for time loop movies, so this one had its hooks in me from the start. I honestly probably would have enjoyed this even if it was very by the books for the genre, but this movie manages to do something different and puts a really fresh spin on the concept. It incorporates a few subtle alterations to the classic time loop premise, which have much bigger and more interesting repercussions than you might think. And by blending in some irreverence and almost meta elements to the story, Palm Springs manages to give us something entertainingly nostalgic and uniquely modern at the same time. The second pro is how charming and heartfelt this movie is. I didn't see the trailer for this before watching, so I didn't have any expectations going in, but based on the first 15 minutes and really the whole first act, I didn't anticipate this turning into quite the movie it did. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, it turned into something much better than I thought it was going to be when it was getting started. It's definitely got the humor, and there's this lightness to the film that makes it a really easy, fun, entertaining watch, but there's this undercurrent of deeper, more mature concepts that are there for you to tap into if you want, but aren't completely shoved in your face. So this is one of those movies that you can enjoy on different levels, depending on how you're feeling and what kind of film you're in the mood for. On the con side, I don't have anything major to talk about. I guess if I had to pick something, it would be that some of the comedy gags didn't really do it for me, or went on a little longer than they probably should have. But, of course, comedy's really subjective, and there was a lot that I thought was funny. I just think it comes on a little too strong at first, especially with some of the more raunchy stuff, but it pretty quickly finds a good balance of comedic tones. Before I give you my rating and recommendations, I want to remind you that if you're interested in buying any of the films I mentioned today, I do have affiliate links for all of them in the description below. I get a small commission from anything you buy using one of my links, so I'd really appreciate it if you use them if you're in the market for any of these movies. I'm gonna give Palm Springs 4 out of 5 paws. This was a really fun and fresh take on the classic time loop movie, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if my rating ends up increasing on rewatch. I hope this goes the way of some of Hulu's original TV shows and gets a Blu-ray release, because I'm going to be so disappointed if this is relegated to just streaming only forever. I would recommend Palm Springs, most obviously, to people who like time loop movies. It's got all the hallmarks of the classic story and certainly pays homage to it, but also puts an interesting spin on the concept that should entertain even people who've gotten bored with time loop movies. And even if you don't really care about the sci-fi elements, I think anybody who likes R-rated romantic comedies or the Lonely Island's comedy style will like this one. If you liked Palm Springs, I would recommend, no surprise here, Groundhog Day. I know it's the most obvious recommendation possible, but it's also the most fitting. Groundhog Day really established the premise and groundwork for the whole time loop subgenre, and Palm Springs certainly draws a lot of inspiration from and pays a lot of homage to that movie. If you want another good, semi-recent time loop movie that puts a bit of a spin on the classic premise, you should definitely check out Happy Death Day, which can be reductively summarized as a slasher horror comedy Groundhog Day. And if you want another surprisingly heartfelt romantic comedy featuring a lot of repetition, you'll want to watch 50 First Dates. It's not a time loop movie in the sci-fi sense, but it sort of functions like one, because one of the main characters has short-term memory loss and wakes up every morning with no recollection of the previous day's events. Alright, a couple questions for you guys. Number 1, have you seen Palm Springs? If so, what'd you think of it? And number 2, what's your favorite time loop movie that isn't Groundhog Day? Be sure to leave your answers in the comments below so we can get a discussion going. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this review, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more videos like this. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.